Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Kent City Council Committee of the Whole meeting. Today is Tuesday, July 13th, 2021, and as you can see, we are in person for our first Committee of the Whole meeting. And I'd like to welcome everyone who's joining us today. We will get started with our agenda, and the first item is roll call. So Kim, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam President. Council President Troutner.
Here.
Councilmember Boyce. Here. Councilmember Fincher.
Here.
Councilmember Kaur.
Here.
Councilmember Larmer.
Here.
Councilmember Michaud. Councilmember Thomas.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Any changes to the agenda from staff or council members? All right, we will get started then. The first item on the presentations is payment of bills. We all get that through email, so we will move on. We will move that to the consent calendar and move on to the next item, which is information only, and it is our May financial report. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. All right, I'm Michelle Ferguson. I'm the Financial Planning Manager, and I will be presenting the May 2021 financial report. Okay, so highlighted on this slide at the bottom is going to be sales tax revenues. So sales tax revenues are received 2 months after they are collected. So what the city received in May was actually from March consumer spending. Sales tax revenue is broken into 5 categories: construction, manufacturing and wholesaling, retailing, food services, and other. So from these categories, the information is broken down even further into subcategories. The city has received $500,000 more in May in sales tax revenue than it did in April. And this is one of the highest months in sales tax that we've received to date. This increase is largely attributed to increases in the retail and other categories. So the retail sales tax increased by $270,000 from April to May. The largest increases were seen in motor vehicle and parts dealer costs, as well as electronic and appliance stores and building material and garden equipment and supplies. The other category increased by $200,000 over the last month, and those increases were seen in the rental and leasing services and administrative and support services. The other category also consists largely of telecommunications, rental, professional and administrative services, and repair and maintenance. And this next slide highlighted is utility tax. And this is just to point out that the budget for utility tax has increased since the last report. The state auditor's office will no longer accept us receiving taxes directly into an internal service fund, so we had to move them into the general fund. So the budget change has been completed to move the revenue from the IT fund into the general fund, and then now, once received in the general fund, it'll be a transfer out to the IT fund. The revenues have not been moved yet, so that's why it's looking like we're coming in under budget. But later this month, those revenues will be posted. So the utility tax is made up of water, sewer, drainage, electric, gas, garbage, telephone, and now cable utility taxes. So most of these categories are coming in close to budget as expected, but there are 2 that are coming in a little bit higher than anticipated, and those are garbage, and the surprising one is electric. So the increase in electric utility tax revenue is surprising because revenues have been trending downward over the last 3 years, but in 2021, there's been a steady 7% increase every month over 2020 revenues. So there's not a whole lot to report on this year-to-year comparison of other funds, but, I just wanted to point out a couple of, before I get there, on the general fund, just some of the other revenues that I didn't talk about that are showing positive variances. So property tax is showing a positive variance from last year because King County decided to allow people to defer payments due to the start of COVID-19. So in June, you'll see that that variance drop off. B&O tax is higher because there was an increase to the gross receipts that we are collecting from businesses, and miscellaneous revenue is higher than in this time last year just because there was a large drop in the miscellaneous revenue that goes into there, which would be off-duty overtime for police officers, as well as miscellaneous parks revenues for rentals and things like that. So it's still not quite where it was in 19, but we are getting closer. Okay.
Yeah, the city council budget is negative.
I will have to look into that one. So I have highlighted the lodging tax revenues, and as you can see, they haven't quite bounced back yet, but they are showing signs of improvement. So pre-pandemic revenues were about $23,000 a month at this time in years past, not last year, but prior to that. And May revenues were only at $13,700, but that is a 23% increase from April. And I've already looked at the preliminary June numbers, and the revenues have also increased another 20% from this month. So we are slowly moving in the right direction for that fund. Capital Resources Fund may not look like it's doing well either when compared to 2020, but as I talked about before, that's due to the shifting of the utility tax revenues and the temporary loss of the SST revenues. But the one category in there that is doing well so far is REIT. So through May, the city has received $1.65 million in REIT revenues, which is 25% more than at the same time last year. And we just received our SST revenue, so you will see that, I believe, in next month's report, that $3.6 million. So, and then the Criminal Justice Fund is also continuing to grow in its revenue variance from last year. The school zone camera revenues in May totaled $250,000, and that is the most revenues that the city has received in 1 month for those revenues in almost 2 years. The red light camera revenues totaled $200,000, which is a 6% decrease from April revenues, but a 40% increase from the same time last year. So as the year goes on, we anticipate the positive variance between 2020 and 2021 to grow. Highlighted on this slide is Councilmanic debt service, and I only wanted to highlight it because when you compare it from year to year, it looks like we're way off, but that was just because a debt was paid early in the prior years in May, but normally debt doesn't get paid till June and December, and so you'll see that in the June report, everything will be back to normal. And the last slide, property insurance is highlighted, and you'll see that there is a expenditure variance, and that is due to the property insurance premiums. The premiums are for, go through a calendar year of July through June. So in July 2020, the premiums increased 17%, and they will be increasing again starting this July now, another 17%, and that will go through June of 2022. So there'll be a budget change coming later on in the year once we know exactly how the year is looking for that fund. Any questions?
All right, that's some good news this time. Thank you.
Go for it.
Council Member Boyce, thank you very much for your question. I wanted to at least provide you with a quick answer as to why the council budget was low. As you recall, last year we did do those budget reductions related to COVID, and one of the support individuals that was that retired in order to be able to save another person and to be able to help our budget, he was paid partially out of your guys' budget, and so that was part of that. So what you're seeing is you're comparing 5 months when the person was still employed to 5 months where the person is gone. Plus then there were some other reductions that took place during that carried over. So you wouldn't have seen those reductions up until May, or at the time of May last year. It's after that you would have seen all those.
Can I have a follow-up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. So Paula, why was it taken out of council then rather than say general funds?
That is part of the general fund. So what happened, that position is both in administration and in council. So there was a portion that was paid for out of each.
Oh, I see. Okay, that makes sense.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, wonderful. We are going to move on to our next presentation. Pat, you actually have these next two. The first one's an ordinance repealing Chapter 8.02 of the Kent City Code, single-use plastic and carryout bags, and this requires action.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. Good to see you. Seems like I'm coming to you to nullify things you've done lately, the rental ordinance and now the plastic ban ordinance. So back in August of 2019, the council passed a ordinance that prohibited the retail use of single-use plastic bags. That ordinance prohibited retailers from using the plastic bags and required the use of recyclable paper bags instead, and a cost attached a fee to the use of those bags. It exempted from that charge those who use public assistance vouchers, and our ordinance established a violation as a Class 1 civil infraction. So in 2020, the state legislature passed its own plastic bag ban, very, very similar to the cities of Kent. We modeled ours after a prior attempt by the state legislature to pass a prohibition. And when the legislature came around to actually adopting its prohibition in 2020, the state legislation is very, very similar to what the city of Kent did. The only thing that's really different is it ups the fee after a few years, so that the fee will be higher eventually than the fee, the 8-cent charge that the city of Kent imposed. The state's fee is now 8 cents. I believe it goes up to 12 cents after 3 years, unless study indicates that it should be higher or lower. The major issue, though, that the state legislature passed in its legislation was that the state law preempts the city's law. So our law we can no longer enforce. I will tell you that because of COVID-19, the enforcement of the state law has been delayed, and that delay will continue until the COVID emergency has ended. I'm not sure at what point. I was unable to find certain information about when that statewide plastic ban prohibition will go into effect after the end of the emergency, but according to the Department of Health, Department of Ecology, it will go into effect when the prohibition ends. I don't know if it'll be the day or a month, so I'm sure they're going to have to give businesses some sort of leeway. So the ordinance before you will eliminate the chapter that you passed in state law. in the city code.
Anybody have any questions? Councilmember Fincher.
I don't have a question, but I will add one thing I like about the state one that we didn't do is it actually steps up the density of the bags, where we were going to go back and look, and there was an issue with the bag suppliers, where we were going to go back and look at ours at the end of a year or so. They actually have time limits in there that step it up. So that's good.
Right. Anybody else have anything? So great to be able to ask this question. Are we ready to move this forward to consent? And I get to see everyone. So is everyone good moving this forward? All right, wonderful. Thank you, Pat. You want to move on to the next item?
Sure. The next one's a little bit unusual. So as you know, we've been dealing with COVID-19, and we haven't been meeting in person for over a year until just last week. And during that time, the governor passed multiple emergency declarations regarding the Open Public Meetings Act. And over that period of time, this council took numerous actions, passing ordinances, approving contracts, et cetera, et cetera. And what I'm presenting to you today is simply a belt and suspenders approach. I will be frank, I have not heard of anybody claiming that the governor didn't have the authority to suspend the OPMA, but our government is based on public participation. And some have argued that public participation was limited because of COVID-19. Others, of course, have said that it's actually been more accessible because of COVID-19. What I'm proposing that you do is pass a resolution to ratify everything you did when we were meeting remotely. And this is just a belt and suspenders approach to make sure that if somebody were to come forward and challenge the OPMA in another city, and let's just assume worst case scenario, the Supreme Court ruled that the governor's restrictions were not permitted. By doing this, you will have covered every single thing that you did, because in an open meeting, you will have ratified everything that you did. So this is just a belt and suspenders approach. I'm recommending it just as a matter of assurance and insurance for all that council did over the past, I don't know, it's been 15, 16 months. So that's what I'm suggesting. It's just a resolution to ratify the actions you took while the city council was meeting remotely.
All right. Councilmember Thomas, do you have a question or comment?
More of a comment. Thank you, Madam President. I just want to say thanks for the good catch. And this is an excellent approach to any problem that we may have had in the future. So I just want to commend you and your staff. Good job on this. This is great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have any comments or questions? All right, are we good moving this forward to consent? Perfect. Thank you very much, Pat. Next, I'd like to welcome Uriel Varela to talk about our equity update.
Good afternoon, council members, council president, Mayor Ralph. So today I'm here to update you on the strategic plan as well as equity-related projects. So here's the outline of my presentation. I'm going to be speaking on GARE's annual conference and our participation in the conference. I'll be giving you a strategic plan timeline update. I'll be speaking on the current community engagement for the plan. I'll be talking about the race and equity core team and the work that they're involved in. And I'll be providing some other updates on equity-related projects. So GARE is a government alliance on race and equity. We are members of GARE. This is the largest network of local cities, municipalities around the country that solely focuses on race and equity issues. So the topic, let me backtrack a little bit. We're using GARE's theory of change as a framework of our strategic plan, and GARE calls for normalizing, organizing, and operationalizing the work. This is the first time in the city's history that we participate in the national conference. The theme of the national conference was Democracy for All, Governing for Racial Equity. We had the entire coordinating committee for the CARE Employee Resource Group participate in the conference. We also had several members of the Race and Equity Core team participate in the conference. These are some of the breakout sessions that I'm including here so that you can get a better understanding of what was talked about in the conference. So one of the breakout sessions that was attended was the inside-outside job of organizing sustainable DEI efforts, culture, capacity building, and systems change. We had elevating BIPOC experiences with storytelling and decision-making. One particularly interesting one is using GIS technology for equity. We talked about an equity index dashboard, and this was a couple of cities who already have that in place, and they were sharing their best practices and results of their work when it comes to using GIS and technology for equity. And the goal of attending these conferences is to provide additional context to those employees who are working on equity-related matters, programs, and policy. And the goal is to increase our presence on a national level as well as local and regional levels. On a regional level, we're going to be hosting the Governing for Racial Equity and Inclusion meeting this Friday. This is a King County network. This is the third time that we host this meeting, and thankfully, Mayor Ralph is going to be doing the welcoming. So the topic of this Friday's conversation is going to be policing and community engagement. So this is a third meeting in the series of three sessions on that topic. Here's a timeline of the project. There's been a slight change when it comes to the actual data collection. So I've been informed by the consulting group that we're going to be receiving results earlier than anticipated. So we're expecting results in August. We're going to be, the consulting group is going to be done with the listening sessions by the end of July. So we're going to be receiving the summary of the listening sessions. There's going to be 10 listening sessions in total by the beginning of August. And on August, we as a core team, as well as myself, are going to be analyzing the results from the listening sessions. After that, I'm going to be developing the plan during September. In mid-October, I'm going to be going back to the community for plan vetting to share what we have as far as a strategic plan. After the community vets the plan, I'm going to finalize the strategic plan, and it'll be hopefully ready by December.
Really quickly, Councilmember Boyce, do you have a question?
Got it right. Thank you. So you go back one page. So the collection, the data collection, now that COVID's over, you said a 10 session, are they going to still be online, or will it be out and about?
It could be a hybrid of both.
Could be a hybrid.
It depends on the organization. So I'll be sharing some of the differences between the in-person sessions and the online sessions in the next few slides.
Okay, I'll hold tight for the next question then.
Councilmember Larmer, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious, will you be sharing the data collection results with us prior to the finalization of the plan? Wonderful.
Providing an update on that. So this is what AV Consulting is doing for us. They're helping with the community engagement process. So I mentioned there's going to be a total of 10 community listening sessions with 3 community-based organizations and 2 listening sessions with multicultural community members. They're also going to be conducting interviews with community-based organization executive directors. The current status is they're finalizing the scheduling for this month. They will be, like I mentioned, completing the sessions by the end of July, and we'll be receiving the summaries at the beginning of August. As far as myself, I'm continuing to conduct listening sessions with community leaders who are not part of the consultants' listening sessions. I'm also continuing to update the Cultural Communities Board on the work and receiving their feedback. And the Race and Equity Core Team, of course, will be helping with the analysis of the data. I'm looking at ARPA funding requests and how they relate to community engagement. And then I'm also working on a limited English proficiency policy and a navigation tool for departments to be able to navigate what documents should be translated.
Councilmember Boyce, you have a question?
Thanks again. This is key, I mean, how we collect data, right? I'm hoping we can cast a wide net, and we need to get data, right? I don't know what success look like for you, but, I think it need to be a pretty good number, in my opinion, for us, making sure we can be able to tell the story. So I hope that you guys keep that in mind, and whatever it takes to get more data, I think we really want to make sure we cast a wide net so we can be able to analyze and get a good point.
That's definitely one of the focuses of this work, to provide baseline data that we can then compare when we're implementing the plan and see if there's a change in that data for the positive.
I guess my thought, I'm only one of 7, but if you have to go longer to get more data, I prefer you guys not to be schedule driven and let the data allow time for people to respond to the data. It's just my opinion.
Yes, I'll do. So this is the community engagement and the accommodations that we're taking in order to facilitate the participation of our community members. So if it's going to be an in-person listening session, there's going to be childcare provided, interpreters, prayer time if applicable, food, transportation, and an ORCA card, participant stipend, as well as translated materials. If it's online, it's going to be, we're going to include interpreters, prayer time if applicable, participant stipend, and the translated materials. Of course, we're trying to address as many barriers for participation as possible, but of course, this is not the end-all be-all of making sure that every member or the community who's interested in participating can participate.
Food is a good thing. Activities to bring people out.
Food's always a good thing, but if it's online, I can't be eating while they're doing that. So this is what the agenda is going to look like for these listening sessions. The bulk of the content is going to be focused on 10 questions, and that's going to be about 60 minutes long. The results from these listening sessions, as well as the results from my own interviews with local community leaders, will be analyzed by the core team during the August and September meetings. The Center for the City's strategic plan. We will center the city's strategic plan around the community's values and lived experiences, and we will use that information and data to develop a racial equity lens. And I'll be speaking more on what that looks like. So just a recap of who the Race and Equity Core Team is. So this is an internal employee-led group who will help steer the cities through the process of developing and operationalizing racial equity. And this is different from the employee resource group CARE. Which is cultural awareness and racial equity. What they do is they provide space to have these conversations, as well as additional information for those who are interested in learning more about race and equity in this country. And the functions of the team are to build capacity building, communications, collecting and analyzing data, championing the work, and of course creating and adapting toolkits for departments to implement equity into their work. And on the left, you see one of the activities that we did last week for our third meeting. I asked, what is your desired result for racial equity work? And we're going to be using that to frame the strategic plan as well. This is what the schedule looks like for the Race and Equity core team. So I mentioned July, we talked about desired results when it comes to the strategic plan as well as just the any equity project. We also talked about community indicators. Where are we measuring to make sure that we're moving the needle when it comes to policy and programs? In August, I mentioned we're going to be doing the community listening session analysis that will extend to September, and the result will be the racial equity lens. So what exactly does the racial equity lens do? So it's a way of quality improvement tool. It will continuously evolve because we will be continuously receiving feedback from community members as well as employees. It will help us incorporate equity into decision making. It will maintain consciousness of historical and societal context when it comes to the work that we're doing. And it will allow us to critically assess and reassess our own practices and policies when it comes to racial equity in the city. The racial equity lens will inform the strategic plan. It'll also lead to a creation of a racial equity toolkit, with the result being providing common vocabulary and protocol for evaluating decisions, policies, processes, programs, and practices for racial equity in the city. So these racial equity toolkits will be one of the goals that the Race and Equity Core Team is working on, one of the projects that the core team is working on. And the goal is to have a racial equity toolkit for each department, because there are different nuances and there is no one-size-fits-all strategy for this type of work. These were some of the projects that were identified prior to the creation of my current role. So it was mentioned that we wanted to have a regional conversation when it came to equity. So as of 2 months ago, the City of Auburn, the City of Federal Way, myself, and Commander Bobby Hollis, the Race and Equity Commander for PD, have created the South King County DEI Network. We had our second meeting last week. We've been discussing a potential regional conversation, how we can come together and make that happen. We've created the Race and Equity Core Team. The Equity and Inclusion Speaker Series has finished, but we're continuing to do research to figure out what potential speakers we can bring to the city in the next few years. As far as the citywide employee training, that has been completed. So it was three phases. So it had, 3 sessions, and those have been completed. This is a training provided by Aaron Jones. The initial hiring and application process review has been completed. Some of those changes have been implemented, and we continue to have these conversations about what's next, because we are not completely done with the review. And the Cultural Awareness and Racial Equity Employee Resource Group was created. Again, we are on month number 7, and the number of employees who are participating in these conversations has been increasing. And we're looking forward to having these in person now that employees are back on campus. And finally, the DEI employee survey was completed. We've received the results, and the results were shared with staff through an all-user email. And we're using, again, some of the results from that DEI survey as baseline data to compare our work year to year.
Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Manager. So, you hired an application process review. I don't remember what changes you made, but I'm assuming there's some changes put in place, and you're going to be measurement as you go to try to figure out what you make an improvement.
Yeah, so we've talked about and implemented implicit bias training for interview panels. We've also talked about the biggest, the biggest goal for this work is hopefully getting to a blind application and recruitment process. So that's going to be happening hopefully after the plan is implemented, because there are a lot of conversations that need to happen prior to us moving that direction.
And you're going to measure that along the way?
We will be measuring, yes, we'll be measuring data as far as applications and interviews. Mm-hmm. And I am happy to answer any question you may have.
Great. So, Uriel, are we comparing, because I know a lot of other cities are implementing things like this as well. Are we having those conversations to, make sure we're covering everything, or see what cities are doing that's working for them that we could implement, or or share our ideas as well?
Yes, that happens often. So I have conversations with my counterparts in other cities, and I can tell you that we're ahead of multiple cities when it comes to the work. So we're headed the right direction. That's one of the learning. One of the things that I learned from the GARE conference is that we're headed in the right direction when it comes to best practices on a national level. So we're doing a lot of what was covered in that conference already.
Great. Yep, go ahead.
So I was going to ask this earlier. So who else using GARE? Is Federal, Auburn?
So I can tell you that the city of Auburn, the city of Tukwila, the city of Renton, the city of Bellevue, the city of Redmond, the city of Seattle, King County, a lot of local cities and municipalities are members of GARE.
One last comment, this is for you. Happy to see you grow into your job, right? I know it's been 4 or 5 months, maybe? 6 months, close enough, right? So, month 7, so I'm really pleased that you tell the passion around what you're doing, and I can see you growing into your job, so thanks for all you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you. Councilmember Boyce, I was going to add, I went to one of the GARE conferences when it was out at Green River, and there are a lot of cities that are involved around. I was wondering, though, with the cities that you meet with more regularly, is Tacoma one of those cities?
Most of our networking meetings are King County based, so we haven't had conversations with Tacoma, but we are looking at the programs and data that they collect, because one of the tools that I'm looking at when it comes to the city of Tacoma is the Equity Index Dashboard and what that looks like. I think that's a really great example of what that can look like and the benefits to the city of Kent if we were to implement that.
I know that they've done a lot of work in this area, and they've been at it for a while and have some good information.
They have a good team, and they are also part of the GARE network, and I've had conversations with them through that network.
Sorry. Is there a repository that kind of collects all this data, you can go and kind of put itself out in the database where you can go and see? Yes, so I've created the Race and Equity Core Team SharePoint page where we have a lot of that information. The CARE team also has a SharePoint site where we have all the different presentations that have been given to employees. Mm-hmm.
Great. Any other questions or comments? All right. Good work, Yuri. Thank you very much. Bless you. All right. A very short meeting today, but we actually got quite a few things accomplished. So thank you to everyone that joined us this afternoon. Have a great afternoon. Enjoy the sunshine, and we are adjourned. Thank you.